Before we really start to learn about bonds, we have to know how to read a chemical formula. The purpose of a chemical formula is to describe the number and types of atoms in a compound. Some of them are really simple, but sometimes they start to look a little complicated. So let's break down the different parts. First of all, we are going to have the element symbols that are involved in the compound, but we're also going to have some numbers that are going to help tell us more about those atoms. Let's start with just regular subscripts. So subscripts are only going to apply to the atom that they are attached to. So this subscript of a 4 is attached to this oxygen atom, so that means that there are 4 oxygen atoms. One important thing to recognize is that we never have to write the number 1. It's automatically implied. So over here what we have is 1 phosphorus atom bonded to 4 oxygen atoms. The next example has a little more going on. So this one has a subscript that is on the outside of a set of parentheses. These subscripts are going to apply to everything inside the parentheses. So where this 4 only applied to this oxygen, this 4 only applies to this oxygen, this 3 only applies to this zinc, this 2 that's on the outside of the parentheses is going to apply to everything inside. So it applies to the oxygen and to the phosphorus. So the way this works is anytime there's more than one subscript and parentheses involved, you're going to need to multiply them. So inside the parentheses we have 1 phosphorus and 4 oxygens, but this 2 is telling us that there's 2 times as many that are inside. So we actually have 2 phosphorus atoms and 8 oxygen atoms. And one important thing to recognize about the charge is it doesn't tell you anything about how many atoms there are. It's just telling you that with a charge of -3 that this compound has gained 3 electrons. So down here, if we were going to look at the chemical formula for this compound, which is zinc phosphate, is the name of that. First thing we're going to do is write out all the elements that we have involved. So we have Zn for zinc, P for phosphorus, and O for oxygen. And I'm going to figure out how many of each of those we have. So we can see that zinc has a 3 subscript attached to it, which is telling me that there are 3 zinc atoms. Next we have phosphorus, and we can see that there's no subscript attached to phosphorus, so that means that there's 1, but it's inside parentheses, and there's a 2 out here, which is telling me that there's 2 times as many phosphorus atoms. So instead of 1, we actually have 2. And lastly, we have oxygen, which has a 4 subscript attached to it, telling me that there are 4 oxygens inside the parentheses, but the 2 applies to everything inside. So that's telling me we actually have 2 times as many oxygen atoms, which means we have a total of 8 oxygen atoms. And the second part of this just wants to know if there's a charge, and remember a charge is a superscript. Since we don't have any superscripts, this has no charge. So here's 3 more examples that you can do to practice this process.